But what do we actually need to sew the long sleeve? Approximately 2 meters of a stretchy fabric, 1 meter in each color, and cuff fabric if needed. Sewing needles, stretch and universal, a normal sewing foot and an edge sewing foot, an iron, a pair of scissors, a seam ripper, a tape measure, chalk or a colored pencil, and thread that matches the color of the fabric. Once we have all our utensils together, we need to prepare our pattern. To do this, we lay all the A4 pages in front of us in the correct order and cut everything perfectly along the edges. Then all small individual pieces have to be glued together to form our final pattern pieces using sellotape. I chose a green and white 100% cotton jersey fabric, which is very comfortable to wear and is also stretchy, perfect for a long sleeve. And a very clear recommendation from me. Use a stretch needle to sew shirts like this. Universal is of course also possible, but it's better with a stretch needle. Now let's spread out the fabric in front of us. Pay attention to the weaving direction of the fabric. This should be vertical for all parts. You can tell this with a fabric like this, for example, if you can stretch the fabric much more horizontally than vertically. The back and front pieces are cut on the fold. This means that you fold your fabric once so wide that the pattern piece fits perfectly in width. Then place the inside of the pattern piece on the folded edge, also known as the fold, pin it in place and cut directly along the edge of the pattern. With stretch fabrics, I would not trace the silhouette of the pattern pieces beforehand. That only causes headaches. Of course, we also need a right and a left sleeve. At this point, we can see perfectly what a raglan sleeve looks like at the beginning. It's a good idea to fold the fabric so that you can simply lay the sleeve pattern piece on top and cut out the two matching pieces directly through the two layers. Now we need the collar. We will make this from the green fabric as well. You can of course also use extra cuff fabric. As a beginner, I would rather choose the version with extra cuff fabric, as the later result will look much better if you're sewing a collar like this for the first time. Finally, we cut out our strip that we will need later to finish the next seam. We will now mark the wrong, i.e. inner side of the fabric if your two sides of the fabric are very similar. This prevents you from accidentally sewing the wrong sides of the fabric together. You will now see a line like this on the edge of the sleeve pattern. Mark the spot as there's the same line on the pattern piece for the front. These lines will help you to align the sleeve when you insert it. In the next step, we iron all our cutout parts in an exemplary manner. This is to counteract the subtle shrinkage factor that will occur when the long sleeve is washed for the first time. It can also counteract the curling of the fabric edges. Make sure you follow all the ironing steps in this video. Believe me, it completely changes the kind of end result of a garment. When I first started sewing, I also did a lot of skipping, but that's not a good idea in the long run. Now we lay our front piece in front of us with the right side facing up. Using the markings we made earlier, we now attach both sleeves right sides facing. It will look like this. For raglan sleeves, we proceed a little differently than usual. Normally, the shoulder sections of a top are sewn together first. This step is omitted today. This allows us to sew the sleeves. To do this, we set the stretch stitch function on our sewing machine. This ensures that no seams open up on the finished shirt due to excessive stretching during movement. You can easily check whether your sewing machine has a stretch stitch function in the operating instructions for your sewing machine. If your machine does not have this function, simply sew the whole thing with a normal straight stitch or a zigzag stitch. When sewing, always make sure to lock the seams at the beginning and end. This means that you first make a few stitches back and forth before you start the right seam. The presser foot glides along its own edge on the edge of the fabric. The needle position is in the center. I finished the overhanging seam allowance with my overlock machine. If you don't have an overlock machine, you can also check the operating instructions for your sewing machine to see what kind of overlock type stitches your machine has and use them to sew the passage again close to the edge. Of course, you can also do it completely without. Now we take our edge sewing foot, fold our finished seam allowances inside to the white fabric side and make a nice top stitch seam on both sides of the sleeves with a stitch length of 4. The back of the long sleeve can now also be attached to the sleeves with clips right sides facing. The whole procedure from before is repeated. Sew together, finish with the overlock and top stitch nicely. Next, we lay our shirt, including the sewn-on sleeves, right sides together and secure both outer edges with clips. It will look like this. Make sure that the seam at the armpits is nicely lined up. In the next step, these sections are sewn together with a stretch stitch and then are overlocked. Next, I overlock the bottom hem edge of the shirt and the hem edges of the sleeve openings. This will be important later. Without an overlock, you can do this with the type of overlock stitch on your normal sewing machine, or you can take a look at the other method that I'm about to show you. For the first variant, I simply fold 2 cm of fabric inwards and fix it all the way around with clips. For the second variant, first fold approximately 1 cm inwards and then the 2 cm. This will also give you a perfect hem. With both variants, the folded strip is ironed in any case. Now we can sew the strip with the stretch stitch and the needle in the left position. The presser foot glides along the inner edge of the fabric. Now we come to the collar. We lay our strip with the right side in front of us and fold both side edges together. This section is then sewn together with the stretch stitch. Now fold the strip lengthwise, wrong sides together. Make sure that everything lies neatly on top of each other at the seam. At this point, we can divide the collar into 4 equal sections. Mark this with clips. Now take our measuring tape and fix it all around the neckline of the shirt with clips to get the exact circumference, starting at the back shoulder seam. Now mark the exact center of the circumference on the wrong side of the fabric. As we also need 4 equal sections here, we can mark these in the same way, so we quarter the circumference. At the back shoulder seam, we now place our collar right sides together, seam to seam. The open edges of the collar point outwards, so to speak. We use our marking points to attach our strip. Each of the 4 sections must be stretched slightly when sewing. To do this, we always pull the fabric apart before and after the presser foot so that we do not see any excess fabric anywhere when stretched. This seam allowance is also finished with the overlock. Before we do the top stitch seam, however, we take our strip for serging the neck seam. We mark half of this as well as the neckline of the back. Now pin the strip to the seam allowance, right sides facing. Fold in the ends on the left and right sides. The strip is now sewn on with a normal straight stitch, a stitch length of 3 and the needle position in the middle. The presser foot glides along the edge of the seam allowance. Now we take our edge sewing foot and set the stitch length to 4. For the top stitch seam, we will now first top stitch only the green sections with a green thread. Make sure to fold the serging strip down. For the white sections, change the color of the thread accordingly. Now let's take another look at the inside. There's a small metal element in the center of the edge sewing foot. Using this, we now make a second seam from the left, but only along the serging strip. We then cut off the excess fabric of the strip with scissors very close to the edge. And the end result is super clean. And this is the finished long sleeve. The 2 colors really harmonize perfectly with each other, and the look of such a raglan fit is unbeatable. Of course, you can do the whole thing with an infinite number of color combinations, and that makes it so versatile. I also think the feel of long sleeve t-shirts like this is abnormally nice. I haven't worn them for far too many years. If you want to sew another classic kind of long sleeve, then check out my other tutorial.